Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can y'all hear me online? Give me a little, I got a thumbs up from Eric. Great. Welcome to our July meeting. We made it most of the way through the year. Let's keep going. Had to do some brief reorganizing, so keeping everyone on our toes with the slides. So we're gonna start off with chapter business, and then we can go on. Yeah, you know the deal. You've been here before. Is this anyone's first meeting? Okay, great. Oh, well, besides Eric, welcome. So chapter business. Just a reminder that we're no longer taking those paper membership forms because we've had some problems with our PO box. So if you have any issue, if you need help with renewing your membership, please talk to Babs. Hi, Babs. And we'll help you. It's really easy to do online. And if you're having issues online, it's probably not your fault. Could be something on our end that we need to fix, and we'll fix that for you. We wanted to talk about y'all. We need some help. Our chapter board needs help to sustain our activities, to sustain what we're doing. It's the middle of the year, kind of tired, and we need some new life, and we want you all to help. So there are a couple ways to help us. And first off, we don't want this to be intimidating. We have created positions that fit what we think the board needs, but you might have a different idea. And so we want you to talk to us. So maybe you're really good at fundraising, or really good at writing emails, or really good at bugging people. Those are some of the skills that we need. And so we have a lot of positions that are opening up, and people are moving around, and we would love some more help. So one of the first things you can do is check out all of our roles and responsibilities. And to do this, you'll go to our website, scnps.org/GS board. And once you get there, there's a huge, it's not huge, it's 2 pages. It's not that long. 2 pages of descriptions of, in general, what our board is about. And I am going to walk us through that real quick. Let's see how quick I can switch over. I think I'm still sharing. So this will tell you a bit about the process. This will be our first real election. Because if you'll remember 2 years ago, it was kind of like by default. We did have democracy, but there weren't any challengers. So we just kind of said, yay. So this time we're hoping for some, vigorous debate and all that. Y'all cannot see this. All right. So the first thing you have to do is complete a short interest form. This lets us know your name, your email, most important part. And then you are generally saying some of the positions you might be interested in. This is not a firm commitment. If you say, I want to do this, we're not going to hold you to that for the rest of your life. This is just a general interest form. But we would like you to also answer the questions that say why you are interested in helping, and some of the other questions on there. It should take you less than 10 minutes to complete, so we get to know you a little bit better. Then we want you to try before you buy. We are opening up our board meetings for the rest of the year. You can join us starting at 6 p.m. on Zoom for the following dates: August 14th, September 11th, October 9th, and November 13th. You can join us on Zoom and see what it's all about. You'll see what upcoming activities we have as we share from our various committees, and you can learn more about the inner workings of our chapter. In order to get that Zoom meeting link, you must fill out the interest form so we know that you're interested in. That's kind of and then we will work with interested candidates to find a place for folks on our board, so we can continue doing great work the rest of this year and next year and beyond. If you have any questions, you're welcome to talk to the current officers, to anyone on the board, and we'll try to be nice and answer easy questions. Any hard questions, leave them for Babs. So we will have an election on the officers according to our bylaws. We'll vote on that in January, at our January meeting. And all of this is the caveat, is this is our first full selection process and some of this might change. So that's in general how this will work. And I wanted to go over all of our positions. So president leads our chapter meetings and oversees our board and our chapter. You sometimes have to talk good, but apparently that's not a huge requirement. You oversee the board, you work closely with the rest of the board, the vice president. Secretary helps with keeping our records, treasurer maintains our budget. Communication chair handles our communications, our monthly newsletter, which is very important in how we communicate with the community and with our members. Membership chairs helps ensure our members are still members, helps recruit more members. Plant sale chair helps set up our plant sales, our two very important plant sales each year. And I wanted to point out 3 new positions. So Maeve Snyder has been acting as our education and our education and outreach education chair, and she's not here, but she's been wearing a lot of hats, and she realized, hey, I'm doing a little bit more than I would like. So she split up her 1 role into 3 roles. So that tells you how much she was doing. So this is now going to be 3 positions. At least this is how we've envisioned it. 1, which is stewardship, which will help lead activities such as invasive species removal, restoration, that sort of thing. Another position will be speaker and field trip, helping plan our chapter feature speakers at meetings and the field trips that we do each month. And then the last position is more sort of general education outreach, sort of coordinating resources for like targeting HOAs. This is more broad, tabling events, all sorts of things. And these probably positions will work together on the education committee. And then we also have people, if you're like, none of these really feel right for me, but I still want to help out. We also have the member at large, where you still serve on the board, but not necessarily a chair or an officer. Does anyone have any questions about the roles or positions? Cool. Yes.
I may have answered this before I got here. Which ones are elected and which ones are just kind of like?
Yeah. According to our bylaws, which we just adopt the state bylaws, it's only these first 4 are elected. So if you're really worried about being elected and having to, I don't know,
Speech and debate.
Yeah, the debate. Don't worry about it. Don't go for those. And that is written on the interest form, which ones, and we should probably add it to here. So that is that. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. We're happy to help. If you're like, I'm a snowbird, which you wouldn't be here if you're a snowbird, right? Yeah, whatever. If you're a snowbird, and you're like, I can only help half the year, we'd probably take you. You know, we can't be picky. And then we have a special call for our communications committee. Okay, so we have various committees, and these, so if maybe being a chair isn't for you, but you still want to help out, you can help on a committee. So we have an education committee, a plant sale committee, and a communications committee. And our communications committee really needs some help. So if you'd like to learn more, you can go to scnps.org/Grand Strand COMS, Grand Strand Comms, GS Comms. You can also talk to Catherine in the back. There's Catherine. And she's laid out a whole bunch of options for you to help out with: newsletters, website, publicity, graphic design, social media. So she's doing a lot with our newsletters, which is how we're getting the information out about everything we do. Have you seen, how many of you are here because of our newsletter? I'm here. I checked when the meeting is to on the newsletter. So, so reach out to Catherine. You can scan the QR code or go to the website. Okay.
If I'm interested in joining the board and want to talk to a current board member in that position, who should I talk to? Should I already tell people that?
You should talk to that person. What?
Yeah.
People know.
The whole introduction.
Oh, my goodness. No.
Okay.
So,
So if I want to be president, who should I talk to? Who's the current president?
I'm, that's me. Uh, so if you're on the board, raise your hand. So these are some of the folks who are here. Also, you have some people you might recognize. So Tierney, who does the plant of the month. Maeve, who helps with our field trips. I'm on the spot now. I'm not gonna be able to remember. It's also listed on our website, but if, yeah. Who else am I missing? I'm missing a couple people.
Jimmy is a member at large.
Jimmy,
Sudi.
Sudi.
Is a member at large.
Yeah. Just ask until you find someone who says they're on the board, I think.
I'm the president.
There's an email address that's, Grand Strand board.
Or, yeah, or if you just generally do our Grand Strand email, you'll get one of us. That was a good question. All right, now I'm gonna stop talking, and Kara, I can give you a hard time.
Okay, good. Yeah, ask me all the questions. So we did our Waccamaw River paddle this weekend. We had 14 kayakers of all age ranges from like this tall, I think Finley's 3, 4, I don't know. She was, yeah, she was itty bitty. She was not kayaking. She was just in the front of a kayak. But we had a great paddle. We had 14 kayakers. Who in the room went kayaking with me? Yay! We went out of Big Savannah Lake, which is an old oxbow off of the Waccamaw River that makes for a really nice loop. So we did a loop. Although if you talk to some of my paddlers, they're probably going to tell you it was not a nice loop and they're mad at me because we had to go against the current a little bit because the river was at 10 feet up at the gauge near there. So that feet gauge is not how deep the river is, but how far it is from the gauge. But normally it's like 6. So if that gives you any idea, we went into a little swamp where we went last year where Kayla was standing beside a giant cypress knee and it was like taller than her. It was completely underwater. So it was deeper than Kayla. If that makes any sense. We paddled about 2 miles. We found 1 toilet seat. We did a little cleanup while we were out there, and I thought the toilet seat was funny, but we saw 0 gentians. And the reason for that is the gentians like to have wet feet, so they were underwater as well. So we didn't see the plant that we went out to see, which was kind of a bummer, but the good news is that next year we should have a great crop of gentians because that floodwater is going to replenish the nutrients in the swamp so that they'll grow even better next year. But we did see a lot of bedstraw St. John's wort, which is endemic to our area. It grows in wet to moist habitats like stream banks, swamps, river bottoms, and floodplains, but you'll also find it in ditches along the road. So if you see this beautiful yellow plant, that might be bedstraw St. John's wort. Hopefully it's the right one. We also, probably our biggest highlight as far as wildlife goes, we did not see any alligators, some to the distress of our paddlers and to the great pleasure of some of our other paddlers who were very not okay with seeing alligators. We saw this great dark fishing spider, and you can see that she has an egg sac on her belly. She is potentially carrying up to 1,400 eggs in that egg sac. And something I thought was cool when I was researching these guys, I knew a little bit about fishing spiders, but I didn't know this. But in this particular species, mating always results in the obligate death of the male. RIP. But these guys are really, really cool. This one was probably about, what do you think, like this big with its legs? Big boy, big girl. What's really cool about these guys is that they hang out on cypress trees and around the water's edge, and they actually hunt for insects that are either on or just below the water surface. And they can actually dive by making like an air bubble around them. So they're super, super cool, and they can run on water. So If you needed more things to be scared about while kayaking and you don't like spiders, here you go. But those were our cool things that we saw. And I think we had a really good paddle. Amelia, Victoria, did you have fun? Okay, perfect. That's all I care about. Everybody else, they aren't here, so they don't get to complain. Okay, I think that's it about the kayak trip. Oh, this is me too. So everybody is aware that we are hosting the 2025 statewide symposium for the Native Plant Society this year, right? It's coming to us, which is really exciting. So we'll have members from all over the state coming close. And we are looking for silent auction donated items. So if you have a business, if you make cool stuff, if you know somebody who owns a business or know somebody who makes cool stuff, please ask them to donate. As your silent auction crazy person, I have gotten one thing donated already. We're gonna have a donated astrology reading by one of my friends. She's really good at it. So you can bid on that, but I'm looking for people to donate things or ask businesses to donate things. We have some forms. So if you know somebody and you want to take one with you, we have a letter telling them why we're doing it. It can also help you with your sales pitch if you need some cool facts to throw at them. And then there's a form for them to fill out about their donation that then gets returned to me. If you're interested in asking somebody, I would kindly ask that you tell me who you're going to talk to or who you're going to get something donated from so that we don't double up and send somebody else to them. But I think that's it. Questions? Questions? Yes.
Is that form on the website if we want to go ahead and download it and have it printed out? Or no?
We can add it to the website. And then we can give you we have a whole bunch of printed copies as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we got a bunch of them.
Yeah, see, I'll just take.
Perfect. Okay. Any other questions? Cool. Now I can sit down, I think,
Well,
right?
if you'd like one, raise your hand. And Kara will bring you one while I always switch over.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. All right. Well, it is time for our featured speaker. Eric LoPresti is joining us tonight on Zoom. So I will stop sharing so he can set up. And while he's setting up, no pressure. So Eric is a lifelong fan of plants and bugs. And so he did his PhD at UC Davis. He started a lab at Oklahoma State, and then he joined USC in 2022. And so his lab studies floral evolution, pollination, seed ecology, and moth community ecology. So a lot of cool insect plant interactions that we're going to hear from today. And so we see your slides, or we see the PowerPoint.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I might turn you up a little bit. Can you say something again?
I'm here.
Is that good?
Yeah. Can you hear the train going off behind me? All right. Well, thanks for having me. Sorry I couldn't make it in person today. I was down in Georgetown earlier this week, and I'll be back next week, but I needed to be on campus the last few days. So today I will talk about some South Carolina moths at the end, but I wanted to give sort of my perspective on natural history and, just the study of nature, since I think this is something that, you guys as the interested public take for granted, but it's not something that the general public thinks about a whole lot. And it's not something that there's necessarily a huge amount of talk between academia and, really interested amateurs like you all. And I would say that this is probably not a surprise to any of you, but natural history information is really the backbone of all biology. We get a lot of our medicines that were originally derived from plants by studying, say, something like shrews, which have a crazy high heart rate. We're actually learning medically important things about how our hearts work. By studying insect ecology, we can learn how to best bolster native pollination of important crops. You might have seen some sort of sensationalist coverage in the past couple weeks about the U.S. dropping millions of flies on South Texas, and knowing the ecology of, in that case, screwworms, or Brazil is producing billions of mosquitoes to combat dengue. And really, this is important for us as humans. It's also really important, just in terms of conserving the natural environment, which all of you obviously care greatly about. And so knowing, every organism, knowing its taxonomy, what it's related to, its life history, how it goes from egg to adult or seed to plant, its behaviors, what are other organisms in the world it interacts with, where it lives, are all obviously extremely important, just to know in general, but also especially for any sort of conservation or restoration outcomes. But don't we know all that already? When I start my insect ecology class every fall here, I lead with the question that isn't, can't you look anything up in a book about South Carolina animals? And you may see news stories like this where we know the exact number of right whales in the entire Atlantic Ocean. We know basically to a T the number of Florida panthers in the Everglades. We know every time a wolf crosses across that Oregon-California border. And that gives us, I think, a sense that we really do know everything. We really can keep track of, individual whales for decades. And I would say that the fact that, the idea that we don't know something about the world around us has become kind of a joke. While I find these Bigfoot TV shows immensely amusing, ultimately they're entertainment. No one is expecting them to find Bigfoot, anywhere in the U.S. We are no longer looking seriously for sea monsters. These tales of sea monsters around the world that have persisted for centuries. People don't think of that as serious science anymore. And so, that might give us the sense that we know all there is to know about South Carolina animals and plants, right? So, this is sort of a discussion question when I give it to a class, but what do you guys, and I'm not going to get an answer here, but I would say the average person, when I ask them what's the likelihood of discovering an insect species that's brand new to science, it doesn't have a name in South Carolina, they say, well, that's probably pretty unlikely. People have been looking at bugs here for a couple centuries. Or how about finding a new, an insect that had been found in Georgia or North Carolina and South Carolina? That also seems somewhat unlikely. I'm going to say that actually both of these are probably quite easy to do. There's almost certainly new insect species in every one of your backyards. And there's definitely, if you look hard enough, there are things that you can add, even in well-known groups. They added a couple new butterflies to the state list, and as far as insects go, butterflies are the best known. And I know they added, I think, 2 last year. But really, I don't think that's really what we should be all that interested in. I don't think that
Hey, Eric, I
Yeah.
think you can tell if you're advancing your slide.
Oh, sorry, say that again.
Are
Where?
you advancing slides?
I'm on a slide that has a bunch of text on it.
Okay, just checking. Wait, are you advancing?
Uh,
Because I could
So-
see a picture of a whale, I thought, and then I was like, I couldn't tell.
what do you guys see? Is it?
We
do you
see
now
like
see some
if
moths?
you're editing the PowerPoint.
Oh boy, weird.
You have highlighted slide 16, that helps in the.
Yeah, we can. Now I can see you clicking around, but it's like,
But it's not in the, I see it as like the full screen and I'm advancing.
no, sorry, we
Oh.
were,
Huh. Okay, let's try this again.
I was like, yeah, you've got a long preamble there, and then, sorry about that. And then I could tell there was a little image of a,
We're
Okay,
still.
well,
Uh,
do you want me to go back to any of these, or sorry, that didn't probably make a whole lot of sense, but here are the accompanying images for everything that I've given so far. And I think this is where I was. And so I would say that we really need to learn about the organisms that are here. And while finding new species for the state list is really wonderful, I'm sure it would be really exciting for any of you to find a plant that hasn't been reported in South Carolina, especially a rare plant. I would say that knowing more about the organisms that are here is what we should be really most interested in. And near and dear to my heart, you guys see the right thing now? Okay, awesome. And near and dear to my heart are the moths of South Carolina, and taxonomists who describe moths. They take the adults, they dissect them. Sometimes they do genetics, they describe a new species. And we know them basically as the moth stage. But the moth stage is really brief. Some of them survive for just a few days. And the point where they're really important in ecosystems, as far as consuming plants and being consumed by birds and wasps and lizards, is the caterpillar stage. And for a great number of the species of moths in South Carolina and across North America, we have no idea what their caterpillars look like, and we have no idea what their caterpillars do. We don't know what they feed on. We don't know what feeds on them. We don't know if they're feeding in the spring or in the fall, if they're feeding on old leaves or new leaves, if they're important food for warblers or bluebirds, etc. And that moths are relatively well known compared to things like tiny flies or weevils, where there's thousands and thousands and thousands of species here in South Carolina, many of which don't have names, and nearly all of which we have no idea what they do. This is not just for insects. In fact, the most plants, we haven't investigated their pollination ecology, or we've invested their pollination ecology, say, in New York or Virginia, and not here in South Carolina. And it turns out when people do investigate the pollination ecology of, say, something like common milkweed across its range, it relies on totally different pollinators across its range. And therefore, knowing what pollinates a plant in New York is of limited utility in knowing what pollinates it here in South Carolina. So there's a lot more to discover. Why aren't we all studying it? There was a really nice article now about 10 years ago by Josh Tewksbury, who was at that point in charge of all the science for the Nature Conservancy. And this article, which I encourage you all to look up, made a really strong case for studying natural history. And it also quantified what all of us knew, which is that natural history is becoming less and less and less of a focus in science. And natural history collections are something that I am really interested in. I collect a lot of moths. I contribute extensively to herbaria since my PhD was on plants. And unfortunately, the number of natural history collections, those invaluable repositories of historic specimens of plants and animals, have declined. So they reached their peak in the 80s and 90s, and they have declined pretty precipitously since then. This was largely driven by university administrations that don't care about them. However, they're really useful. There was this beautiful paper published this summer where folks in the Netherlands wanted to know when microplastics first entered the environment. So what they did is they went to an insect collection and they looked at caddisfly casings. And caddisflies are these wonderful stream-dwelling insects that build these little homes for themselves as larvae, usually out of little pebbles and little sticks. And they found that uh, in the early 70s, the caddisflies in what they described as pristine streams in the Netherlands had started incorporating microplastics. It was 40 years or 30 years before the term microplastics was even coined. And the people that were collecting those back then had no idea, that was something that was going to show. So natural history collections are invaluable for understanding just the world at large. Also, academia is producing fewer people with PhDs in natural history. Back in the 60s and 70s, a large portion of our biology PhDs were in natural history disciplines, in ornithology, in botany, in entomology. And now it has reduced to, I believe it's well under 20% at this point. And perhaps most concerningly, because most people don't get a PhD, most concerningly is that you can get a biology degree at almost every university in this country and not take a single natural history course. This is certainly true at USC. Most of our 1,800 biology majors don't take a single natural history course during their time. They don't get that exposure to the organisms around them. And university administrations are deciding that, largely for financial reasons, that natural history study is not worth it. Biomedical study brings in a lot more money, has a lot more interested students, and therefore, natural history is expendable. The Deucherbarium, which is hundreds of years of plant specimens, and is the 7th largest herbarium in the country, the administration decided that it was not financially viable, and therefore they were going to shut it down. There was a wonderful quote from a botanist in the New York Times that said, this is like shutting down the library. And so I would say that the reason that we're not all studying natural history is because nowadays natural history as an academic discipline is dead. And that's not an only academic problem. As many of you know, people are spending less and less time outside, and this is leading to worse outcomes for children in school and outside of school, and so on and so forth. That's not really my focus, but I do highly recommend this book. And yet, I would argue that natural history has never been important as it is today. We are in the middle of the quote unquote 6th mass extinction. We are losing organisms at a rate that is absolutely unprecedented. And, plants, animals, you name the taxa, you name the place on Earth, they are declining in abundance and diversity. And so I would argue that we need natural history because it's really the fundamental knowledge that would underlie any attempts to solve these problems. And in something close to home, Bachman's warbler was first collected in Charleston in the early 1800s. It was last seen in Florida in 1977, and we still don't actually know. We think it was a species of canebrake, but we don't really know what it did, and there was no way we could conserve it without knowing what it did. So what are we supposed to do? Well, here's where the wholly pessimistic first 15 minutes of my talk is over, and I'm going to get into a feel-good story and then a call to action. So in the late 1800s, Alice Eastwood, who is widely considered to be sort of the mother of California botany, she was the first curator at the California Academy of Sciences of the herbarium. She discovered a new species of manzanita on one of the hills in San Francisco. She named it Archistaphyllus franciscana. And within 50 years, it was virtually extinct. It was restricted to this one cemetery. And then I think by the 50s, it was entirely gone. No one had seen evidence of it. People had looked all over. Just another species lost because of urbanization, the building up of San Francisco being a really a large city. However, in 2009, this guy, Dan Glusenkamp, who was president of the California Native Plant Society, was stuck in traffic on Route 101, which, if any of you have driven through San Francisco, is a really common occurrence. And they had started doing construction on a new clover leaf. And so they'd taken out a bunch of the invasive vegetation right on the side of the road. And he's sitting stuck in traffic, and he noticed a prostrate manzanita. And there's only one prostrate manzanita that's native to the San Francisco Peninsula, and that's of course the one that had been missing for almost 60 years at that point. So he called some other botanists, and the next day they jumped across traffic, and they found that extinct species sitting, 4 feet away from a highway that millions of people drive every year. And they were able to successfully relocate that individual. It took 3 months. They, took a crane, took a several ton plug of soil, moved it to the Presidio. They've taken clones, and that species is more or less secure. It has one individual plus another that's been in a botanic garden for the last 100 years. And I don't, think of that as a huge conservation success story. That species is probably doomed. It has no habitat. However, it highlights just how, how the surreptitious or serendipitous those discoveries can be, and really highlights how, you should really keep your eyes open at all time. However, most of you, myself included, wouldn't have any idea that manzanita were at all special. However, we really live in what I would term a golden age of natural history knowledge. The field guide is an invention that we all take for granted, yet Roger Tory Peterson invented it just about 100 years ago. And that was for birds. And now we have guides for grasshoppers and butterflies and the footprints and signs of insects, as well as for every specific group of birds, every specific group of plants, every region in this country. And that's fantastic. I have several whole bookshelves of field guides at home and in my lab. I'm sure many of you do as well. And academic books, some of you may be familiar with the Flora of North America. This is a fairly dense set of keys and brief descriptions of all the plants in North America. Well, it takes up several whole bookshelves. These enormous volumes. They're super useful. Every herbarium has a set, and now you can just pull it up on your phone when you're in the field to get all of that information instantly. That's something that Alice Eastwood would never have dreamed possible 150 years ago. And that's just one example. For every taxa that you want, Cornell has all of these fantastic apps and internet resources. You can hold your phone out with the app Merlin, and it will tell you what birds are singing around you. If you're interested in moths, Mississippi State has this fantastic website for all the moths of North America, and so on and so forth. And many of those are not made by professionals. Many of those are made by interested amateurs. So Jeff Pippin, who's up in North Carolina, has websites about the butterflies and odonates and all sorts of other taxa of North Carolina that I'm sure many of you have used. I have certainly used them and found them really highly useful. They're mostly useful for South Carolina as well. And that's all in addition to this rapid rise of community science or citizen science. The two biggest efforts here are eBird and iNet. And I encourage all of you to check out both of these if you have not. But basically, they have just crowdsourced gathering, distribution, and abundance data of organisms. And that's made wonderful things possible. So here's an animation that's just put together from lists of bird watchers of my favorite bird, the scissor-tailed flycatcher's migration every year from the southern Great Plains down to its wintering grounds in Central America. And that's millions and millions of records that amateurs, like you and I, have put into eBird and, made this level of granularity of data possible. And so I would say that we really do live in an era of unprecedented access to natural history. We also live in an era of absolutely fantastic technology. So a really good pair of binoculars or a really good pair of microscope 40 years ago would have cost you, a huge amount. Whereas now my lab, we have some nice microscopes to do our bug work, but we largely use these little $20, $30 microscopes that you plug into the USB port on your laptop because they work 90% as well. And you don't need a fancy pair of Swarovski binoculars. You can get a pair of Canons for a couple $100 that works nearly as well. And that's fantastic. And so never before has creating data and making scientific contributions been easier for anyone. It's also never been more important. And so I think that largely this democratization of science is fantastic. And I think we really are living through a time where natural history knowledge is really open and accessible and readily available. And so now I'm going to actually get into what I do. And this is all set up by the contributions of an amateur about 50 years ago. So Richard Dominic grew up in South Carolina and also in New York. He worked as an ophthalmologist professionally, and he was a maniac for moths. And in 1965, he retired to Charleston County, right on the south side of the Santee River. So if you're coming down Route 17 from Georgetown to Charleston, you come over those two bridges and you take a left. And he had bought 400 acres there and devoted the rest of his life to collecting moths and documenting the moth fauna of that region, which was relatively unknown. And he knew that this would be an interesting and long-term project. Being fairly wealthy, he was able to actually hire a full-time assistant. He built himself a laboratory, and he turned a small building on his property into a moth trap. So it had huge banks of light in it, and it had these shutters that opened at dusk, closed at dawn, so he could just walk in the morning and pick out whichever moths were interesting. And he did that every night. And he made one of the, if not the best single site collection of anywhere in the United States. And this really differed, and this was really important because it differed from most moth and butterfly collectors because, people would collect kind of near their home a little bit, but then they go on a trip to get some species from Colorado or some species from Maine or some species from California. And instead, Dominic wanted to collect everything that was on his property in Charleston County, as well as document, its life history. So at the top there, you can see that he's pinned caterpillars. Very few people pin caterpillars. It's a real pain. I mean, it's an art. I can't do it. At the top right, he documented the parasitoids that had emerged from that Cypress Sphinx caterpillar. And so he really wanted to document and understand all of the species on his property. Given that he was a wealthy individual who was monomaniacal in his pursuit of natural history information, he also befriended some of the top lepidopterists, so people who study butterflies and moths in the country. And these included people like Doug Ferguson, who was at the Smithsonian, Jack Frankelmont at Cornell, various folks at the Canadian National Museum, at Yale, at Carnegie, and a whole bunch of other natural history museums. And he had them down to the southeast to collect moths with him and to help him out with his collection and to show them sort of the abundance of species down here and of interesting species down here, since virtually no one else was collecting here. The other thing he did was he endowed a foundation, the Wedge Entomological Research Foundation, that was committed to disseminating knowledge about moths and butterflies of the US. And they did so in two ways. They both published these really dense academic texts on taxonomy. These things are, an inch or 2 inches thick, and they deal with, one family or one tribe of moths. And these are kind of the equivalent of that flora of North America. But he also helped put together and did all the photography for the first field guide to moths of anywhere in North America, but of eastern moths. And this guide that he worked on in the late 60s and early 70s is still in print today. And unfortunately, in 1976, he died suddenly, and no one really carried on his collecting effort. However, in 2022, I got a job here. I was planning on doing just botany, but there was this wonderful moth collection here. And I decided it was only right 50 years later to see what had changed at that site. And so here in that solid triangle there, that was Dominic's property. The large dotted shape below it is the Santee Coastal Reserve, which is a beautiful property. If any of you have not explored it, I highly recommend you do so. And then there's the Santee Delta in the square up above. And so those are the places that I have access to. So we're essentially surveying the same populations, not at exactly the same site, but it's contiguous, both salt and freshwater marshes and Atlantic and pine forests between those. And so in the past couple years, we have collected and databased and pinned tens of thousands of moths. And what we've documented are an awful lot of the same species that Dominic saw, but we've also documented a whole lot of species that weren't documented 50 years ago. And the vast majority of these species are things that were known from Georgia and Florida and have been able to walk their way north, given that especially wintertime temperatures are increasing. So we're getting fewer nights of frost in coastal South Carolina now than we were 50 years ago. In 1968, when Dominic was collecting, the Charleston airport had 68 nights of frost. In 2023, when I was collecting, they had 8. And the decadal average, while he was collecting, was about 40 nights of frost, and the decadal average now is about 20 nights of frost. Additionally, we wanted to know weather phenology, so that's timing, the timing of when the moths are adults and out flying is shifting. And fortunately, given Dominic's fascination with life histories, he took notes and left them in the collection of when to expect various species. And so I had a wonderful undergrad, Ellie Fletcher, from USC, who's from Columbia, and she went through the entire collection, took out his notes, and she compared the historic flight times between 1965 and 1976 to those that we got in the first 2 years of the project. And what we found is that most species are emerging earlier, they're staying out later in the year, and therefore the flight seasons are getting longer. And this is something that has been documented quite a bit in the Northeast and in mountainous regions, but it's really the first time that people have documented climate change shifting the timing, life history timing of moths and butterflies in the Southeast. So, to conclude, natural history has never been more important. We need to know, in order to solve any of the problems that we've created, we need to know about what organisms are doing in the environment. Unfortunately, at least academic support for natural history is waning rapidly. One of the University of Louisiana campuses gave some curators of their like several million fish specimens about a month to get them all out of a spot that they wanted to put a new stadium in. And fortunately, they did so. However, for non-academics, and even for academics, this is a golden age of knowledge of natural history and democratization of the effort. And a lot of it is being done by people like you. Amateurs are contributing an awful lot of the knowledge of where organisms are, what they're doing, and that is like truly invaluable. And so, in conclusion, I would say keep your eyes out and your curiosity high. I didn't mean to discover this fly, but I found some interesting fly larvae, sent them to a friend who was studying this group, and sure enough, they turned out to be a new species, and he named them after me. So that's all I have for today. I hope I didn't talk for too long, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for Eric?
What makes a fly larva interesting?
So Charlie was trying to document all leaf miners. So you can think of a leaf. You have your two epidermal layers. You have your like waxy kind of outer layer, and on each side of the leaf, and then you have all the good stuff in the inside, the chlorophyll and everything. And so there are a lot of caterpillars as well as fly larvae that spend their entire larval period between the epidermal layers of a leaf. So you can look at hollies have a lot of leaf miners here, oaks have a lot of leaf miners here, and you'll see just little kind of trails. And that was in a fairly rare desert plant. And so I knew it must be something interesting. And so I packed them up in a package and mailed them to Charlie. And sure enough, it turned out to be a new species.
So. Any other questions? Well, let's give Eric a big round of applause.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. I know you've had a long day of science and grant writing and everything, so we appreciate your time. Keep doing the good work.
Thanks. If anyone has any questions, you can also email me. I'm easy to find.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. His website's really great online. If you search him, you can see what he and his students are up to. Let's see. All right. Featured speaker, done. So you know what time it is. Oop, let me make sure folks online can see that. Uh-oh. I think you're good. I'm just gonna check. And you'll have to tell people that you're not turning.
That's not, no. And that's not my song pick, but it's a good, if that was Tierney's pick, it's wonderful. I have to say that, so. Yeah, Tierney asked me to fill in today because she's traveling, so I appreciate her thinking of me to do this. And I had fun coming up with a plan for this month. It's been a busy time for me right now with work and a lot of different things, work related, but in the back of my head, I've been thinking about it, like what would be my choice? Because it was totally up to me. This is my choice for Plant of the Month. And honestly, I don't think it's going to win Plant of the Year. I'll just go ahead and say that right now when we vote. And I probably won't even vote for it. So If I was doing that, I had like the other two, I'll just blurt this out real quick, that I considered were Salvia azurea, which is blue sage, and Ohio spiderwort, because they're kind of interesting. But this one deserves really, I think, attention because it's one that I hear, it's such a common plant. I think everybody here will know it exactly when you see it. And it's actually, I've even heard it kind of poo-pooed in the native plant world too. I'll go into that briefly here. So if I'm going to advance,
Just click on this, yeah,
uh,
click there.
click anywhere on it. Okay.
Yeah.
Click again. Okay, there we go. All right, cool. Thank you. Yeah, so it's going to be cattail. Yeah, botanical name is Typha latifolia. Is there anybody in here who doesn't know cattail at all? No, of course not. You can see it driving down the Highway 17 in ditches. And there's probably there's a good story to that too, but it's in the I gotta pronounce this right. It's the Typhaceae. No, let me get my notes here. Typhaceae. Okay, that's the family. It's the genus obviously is Typha, which is the genus for all cattail plants. If I remember right, there's about 30 different cattails, and there's 3 found in South Carolina. Well, actually 3 in North America altogether. And the one I'm going to be highlighting is common cattail. This is the one that is found all over the country, actually all over the world. And the common names for the plant, I think, are kind of funny. Yeah, you got your normal ones: broadleaf cattail, common cattail, cat o' nine tails. Sounds British to me. There's, oh gosh, there's another one that's definitely British that I read, and I didn't put it on here. But punk, it does look like a punk that you would light. Corn dog grass, I can see that. Candlewick makes sense. Cossack asparagus actually relates to the edible part of it, which I'll touch on. And of course, there's a distribution range. Not, I don't think there's a state in the country that it's not found in except Hawaii. And so found all over Canada, Alaska, Mexico. The Global Invasive Plant Council, I believe is the name of the group, has a list of all the countries on the planet that this is native to, and it's extensive. It's over 30 countries or even more. But there's 6 island countries that it's considered invasive in, and that's kind of an aspect of a lot of native plants. Maybe we don't always think about what's native here. Just like we have invasives, obviously can escape into other places and become invasive over there. But it's, if I remember right, it's Australia. Some big countries like Australia, New Zealand, it's considered invasive over there. And that makes sense being surrounded by water, Hawaii. River systems, waterways are all kind of interconnected in North America in some way or another. Water is all, recirculating. And that's its main highway of travel, so to speak, and that's its habitat. Yeah, it only gets a little bit more rare over in Texas, and just based on my personal observations, I think it's a little bit, obviously it likes standing water to a certain degree. So to my opinion, you find it a little more in coastal areas. But when you get up into the Piedmont and the mountains of the state, they have areas that fit the requirements, and you do see it up there. The flowers of the plant are what you're probably familiar with seeing, and as far as like the big characteristic of cattails, it's the big fluffy part that's brown. It's actually, they're monoecious, which is hermaphroditic. Obviously, they have male and female. The male is up top on the very stem that doesn't have any of the fluff around it, and the female is below it. The picture over there is a close-up of the pollen before it starts to go to flower, which is it spreads all over, and obviously that's how it pollinates. It's very easy to blow in the air. Also the flower is all connected, the male and female part It's solid. I'll talk about just briefly a couple of the two other cattails, and they're a little different. That'll be the distinguishing characteristic as far as IDing the different types of cattails. The leaves of cattail are broad and linear, which makes sense when you look like it. It does look like a grass blade. The common cattail, the one we're highlighting, is usually 1 inch wide or less, and it's basal, alternate. They are overlapping. You can see that in the picture here. What you can't see in the picture is the sheath at the base, which is just like a sheath of a sword. It kind of just comes out of that and it kind of just hangs off the side. One thing I found interesting, and it makes sense, is the shape and the way that this plant seeks oxygen, which is opposite of most plants, obviously, because it's got all the water it ever needs. That's the way it grows. But the blades are vertical. The reason for that is inside the blade, you have tubular it's like a porous tubular vessels all the way up through it that are seeking oxygen to bring it down to the roots and the rhizomes to facilitate that. And if you were trying to get oxygen from the air, you wouldn't want your leaves going all different directions and falling over, because a straight line, lets you get oxygen down to your roots a lot quicker. So that makes sense with it. The fruit is the nutlet with the fluffy hairs. This is a close-up picture I found. That's the fruit right there. It's 2 millimeters long at its biggest size. So that's, itty bitty. And the fluffy hairs are common with it. You'll see that obviously after more into the fall is when that starts to form. As far as the flowering goes, you'll see that start to form in the summer around here typically, and then after it goes to seed, that's when you get the characteristic of the fluffy tail to it that kind of looks like a cattail. And when you get into winter, how many people here have ever just played with it in winter, and it's just like fluff that goes everywhere? That's the same way that the seed disperses. The wind carries it, and there's a lot of uses for that fluff, but that's a close-up of it. There's no cultivars. It's not really typically found in the trade, in the greenhouse trade for sale, because it is so common. And getting into why it's maybe kind of looked down on, I've heard it down by some native plant people, is because it is, even with other native plants, it can be kind of what they consider to be aggressive. The story behind that really, to me, is more based on the changes in ecology that humans have created, though. It's actually, when I was doing research for this, because I didn't know a lot about this plant beyond just my personal experiences seeing it, the way it behaves is it has a niche environment. It wants to go in areas, if you're thinking long-term in a geological time, ponds, areas of fresh water. It survives and I will say this, it survives in freshwater, brackish water, more on the freshwater side for the common cattail, but it can survive some salinity. But any kind of standing water, ponds, lakes, rivers, and in rivers, you'll see it in slow water areas, on a bend of a river. But it's usually in an area where there's erosion of sediment coming down, and it's considered, in that perspective, a transitional. If you see it in the wild in a little stand, that area is transitioning from wet to dry over long periods. So it will naturally have to migrate out, which makes sense with the rhizome spreading. If over long periods of times, it's got to get over to this spot eventually, because that spot's going to kind of fill in on itself and it's not going to be able to live. And in nature, though, like in unspoiled areas, I never see it overtake anything. And that's because it's co-evolved, just like all of our other truly native plants. It co-evolved with other native plants to survive, and those plants co-evolved with it. So they kind of have a mutual battle going on, that over a long period of time, they've learned that we can't try to kill each other because it's not going to work out. A very interesting, very cool thing about this plant, to prevent its overspreading in an unspoiled area, it actually, when it gets to a certain size or stand, and how this all works, I can't explain it, but it sends out a chemical reaction that kills the germination rate of its seeds naturally. So it doesn't want to like overtake every square inch. And the true common cattail does kind of mix in with other plants. You can have an acre. If you have 1 acre of cattail, it's actually only 2 or 3 plants, just because of the rhizomes and the way they spread so much. But again, the true native common cattail does kind of work okay. Did I go? Yeah, here we are. Okay, so probably some of the, I said there's no cultivars, but there's 2 other types in South Carolina, the narrow leaf cattail, which is Typha angustifolia, and the southern cattail, Typha domingensis. They deserve mentioning because the angustifolia, you'll see it listed as native for the coast of South Carolina in some places. Like USDA has it listed as native, but they don't know, it's disputed. I've seen like the history of its designation, and it literally has gone back and forth over the past 40 years to being native, not native, and I think they're considering it not native now. But the most likely explanation, because it was first recorded in the early 1800s, is it came over like a lot of other things with Europeans and found a niche right along the coast of the East Coast. And it is kind of spreading into other areas of the country where it definitely is not native. So it's invasive, non-native in most places, if you consider it native here. And then the southern cattail, and the other thing I will mention, like the distinguishing characteristic of this plant to tell the difference apart is the staminite, whatever it is. I'm sorry, it's the bottom part. But there's a separating gap of about 2 inches or 1 inch between 2 cones. So if you see something like that, that is probably angustifolia or domingensis. Domingensis is a lot like that, except it has a lighter color. I saw pictures of it. I didn't get one to put in here, but it's got definitely a lighter color and brownish glands dotted on the inner surface at the base of the leaves. That one is generally considered native, but it's native to the whole southern part of the US and then up the coast of the East Coast to a certain point. The problem is definitely the hybridization that's taken place with angustifolia, which is Typha x glauca. This is a picture of a scientist. It's far away in Indiana, but just like any hybrid plant, it's the one that's causing the problem is a cross between the common cattail and angustifolia, and it's a plant that has the strong traits of each. So it's not cooperating and getting along and sharing space with other natives because of that. And it's kind of taken over in large areas, mainly in the Midwest, but I looked it up. It's documented in Georgetown County, this Typha x glauca. So it's an issue here, and I don't know if you can ID it, you can do it. How you combat that is something people are trying to find out, and more power to them for that. But yeah, that part of it, again, I think we do so much altering of the land around with, especially in suburban areas with ponds that, or even canals that we constantly want to keep clean. They get dredged out or they get scooped out. So we're constantly creating the right environment for cattail to kind of take over and not really having any of the other native species in such an artificial environment, because it's so disturbed, it can dominate and just run wild. And that's where I think the reputation comes from with it. And then of course it has a lot of good faunal associations. More than just this, but as far as host plants go, there's moths that use it. Julia's Dicymolomia. It's been a long day, so I can't pronounce it. Molomia, the shy cosmet, which is the one on the right here. Both are host plants, and just like any of your native plants, the larvae that they hatch overwinter in the actual stem. So if you do happen to use it as a landscape plant, cut it back, those are not going to have a chance to emerge. The red-winged blackbird, there's other birds that use it, but yeah, they use it to build their nest, all the fluff and all the different parts of the plant. Deer, raccoons, cottontails, turkeys all use it for cover. Just too many birds use it for nesting and use it. If you're talking about salamanders, that's one of the main plants that protects the eggs for salamanders by them hatching it in a stand of that. And yeah, and then there's us too that have the associations with this plant. And who knows, like obviously this plant was a survival plant, I think, for Native Americans as well as us, Europeans that came over, colonists. It has so many properties that we find positive and useful. But I will mention, as far as the modern times, one thing very important here to note is the bioaccumulator in nature aspect of the plant. What that just means is this plant is remarkable for its ability to take up what's in the soil, what's in the environment around it. So if you see, plants growing in ditches or anywhere in kind of an urban or suburban area, and that it's edible, you might want to think twice about eating it, because if there's any toxins around, it's going to take it up. If you have it in an unspoiled area or somewhere just buffered between a lot of pollution, that would be a good one, because then it's actually taking up a lot of the natural positive aspects of the environment. So it's used as a cleanup tool for a lot of mines that have had spills. Just anywhere that's if you're in an area that's got runoff for herbicides and pesticides with agriculture, it's going to take those up. But if a lot of remedial projects have included planting cattail just with the purpose of aiding in the cleanup, our Superfund sites, which are sites that are now polluted from old mining activity or some other reason, to a point where the government has had to come in to kind of aid it, this plant is often used for it. And I talked about the niche habitat in the wild. Yeah, of course, Native Americans and early colonists were using this for food of all types. I'll just mention a couple of things, because this is the part that I think hits with everybody. And if it's clean and pure, it's considerable like another alternative to a more ecological form of food, if you think about it from that perspective. But you can use this for the pollen is actually a flour substitute that's high in protein. Reportedly, it has more vitamin C than oranges, the roots. The best time if you were like harvesting roots for eating would be in the fall and winter. The catkins, which is the brown part there, before it starts to go to flower, can actually be eaten like corn on the cob when it's green. So, this goes on and on. The roots medicinally are known to protect for stings and burns and cuts. Some places are experimenting with it as a biofuel. There's old remedies for the sap being used for toothaches. So baskets, I just threw in this picture. This was fun. This whole seat cover is made with cattail leaves that this person at that web address made there. Baskets, yeah. So it's just a fascinating plant to I think we all take it for granted. So I thought it would be kind of neat just to dive a little deeper into it. So thank you. Any questions or?
Good job.
Yes, ma'am. The only reason I think it would be attracted is because the landscape has been altered to favor the spread of it. in areas that are altered, there's not the natural competition of a truly native, like a native plant seed bank that's got all the necessary components to keep it in check. So that's why I think it kind of goes into those areas sometimes unintentionally, whether or not that, you know, the county plants it in the ditches intentionally or unintentionally to kind of help with runoff pollution. That's a question I'm wondering now that I see that all over the place with it. Yeah, so there was something else I was thinking of, but anyway. Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Thanks for doing our plant of the
Yep,
month.
welcome.
It would have been a terrible month without plant of the month. All right, let's bring us home with some upcoming events to look forward to. Well, I would love to look forward to this event, but we need more people to sign up. So you might have missed this in the newsletter, but it was, we need gardens. So we want you to volunteer your home garden. So if you have native plants in your garden and you'd like to showcase them, we'd like you to sign up. So check the newsletter. It does not have to be a perfect garden. If you have a weed, that's okay. Like, you know, if you don't have 100% native plants, that's okay too. We want to see what real native gardens look like with a mix of conventional horticulture with a mix of native plants. We want to see it because we want to see what our members are doing to inspire other members. You don't have to have Tierney's backyard. You can have your backyard and we want to see it. So this won't happen unless people sign up. All right, enough about that. Our July field trip is Saturday, July 26th. Mike, do you want to add anything here? Put you on the spot?
Yeah, just, we're gonna be, I think, quite a few of you in this room helped out. We were planting, the greenhouse raised plants that the wonderful folks at Brook Green, grew for us. So this is actually about not counting those plants. This is about counting the naturally recruited plants. That's kind of our gauge of success. Since it is a very short-lived annual plant, the whole goal of putting the greenhouse plants out there is to increase the seed bank and get the plant to become naturally established on its own. And I've been trying super hard not to count the plants as I encounter them, and I've been counting them quite a bit lately. Because I came across like half a dozen yesterday, not looking. And every time I do, I'm like, I'm not looking, because it's not fair. I'm saving the results for y'all to discover on July 26th.
Awesome. And they should email you if they want to sign up, right?
If you would just email me, I'll make sure that you get into the park free of charge. We will be meeting at the North Beach parking lot. Please make sure you bring drinking water. And I will be transporting you up and down the different sections of the beach. And our goal is to get the whole 3 miles of beach in the park covered and counted. But yeah, last year's results, we had over 130 naturally recruited plants. That was a record for us.
Cool. Amy?
You said, please make sure you bring what?
Drinking water.
Water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hot out there.
Mike, could
Yeah.
you send that out to either anybody at the Mr. Gardner, because they can get that out to all the members there.
Okay, yeah, I have not. Yeah, I was just
Well, I can send that link out to them.
okay.
That'll help them, and then they can just contact you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, right now we only have 2 people signed up, so yeah, it's definitely useful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get on that.
Let's do it. All right. Our next Green Drinks events. Kara, do you want to share this?
Sure. We're hosting the next Green Drinks event. It'll be in August, Wednesday, August 13th at the Quad in Pawleys Island. We'll talk about kind of what we have going on, hopefully recruit some new members, but this is also going to serve as a meet and greet with board members in a more relaxed environment. So you can, yeah, just like that. That's what we'll all be standing like. But, you know, maybe once the board members get like a beer in them, they'll be more honest about their actual responsibilities. So this is the time to really talk to them if you want to like learn about a board member position. So we encourage everybody to come. We have to beat Audubon. They have the most people that show up, so show up.
Next month, because it'll be too hot to go outside. Just also want to do a plug for the Master Rain Gardener course hosted by our friends at Clemson. This will be starting next month and you need to register by August 8th. It's online with an in-person field day that will be at Baruch, where you will be installing a rain garden. So if you're interested in learning more about rain gardens, how to do them and help install projects in the future, you should definitely check this out. We will see you back here at the Coastal Science Center in September 18th, for our next chapter meeting. Did want to have a save the date for our next native plant sale, October 11th. But hold on to your seats. It's not going to be in the Conway Town Green. We are switching locations and we're just going to wait until that permit's approved before we announce it, because knock on wood, but it's not going to be in Conway, because there was a conflict. But this will be the week before our symposium. So it's going to be a busy October for all of us. And with that, also our big event in October is the statewide symposium, and that will be a weekend of field trips, of connecting with other members, of learning, of lectures, the whole 9 yards. So you'll be hearing more and more about that over the coming months. So we really encourage you to participate with that. And you do have to be a member to register for this event. So if you're not a member yet, please check with Babs. Do any members in the room have an update? Anything they want to share? No pressure. We have,
I
yeah,
just want to say thank you to Tierney, who's not here, and you as well. The problem I have with the website with ordering, there is Native Plant Society gear out there that you can get.
yeah,
I meant to wear my t-shirt today, but I forgot.
yeah.
But, you know, she, filtered through all the issues that happened with that was going on and got it all taken care of. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thanks for ordering. And occasionally there are issues, but we figured it out. So thanks to Tierney for that. Yeah,
Did the survey for the garden tour, and when it got down to list some of the species, you had a kind of a brain dead, so I went back the day after I hit the enter button and checked off my list. I know up to 78 individual native plants that I have put in my yard in
all right.
and halfway towards my goal of 30% of my yard being converted for a homegrown national park.
Nice.
I have achieved the Carolina Yard certification. I have got I'm on the map with Homegrown National Park. I have got a National Wildlife Federation certified wildlife, whatever it is. And they did a new thing where you can get a score on how well you're doing, and I hit 80 and I'm going, what?
Only 80, yes.
It's 80 out of 100.
Huh.
Is that for the Carolina Yards?
No,
Thing you check off?
that was a World Wildlife,
Really?
Wildlife Federation.
Huh.
It's new, maybe it's one of the others. Anyway, the big deal is that, I was in Mullins last week for a political event and got to, talk with Gavin Newsom. But while I was there, I also encountered one of the, state legislative reps and approached him about legislation for similar to what Maryland has in lifting or prohibiting HOAs from saying you can't put native plants in your front yard.
Mm.
He was very receptive. I have sent him additional information. And I'd really like to encourage everybody to start reaching out to their state reps and say, this is what we want, because we can make it happen. And I'll just keep you posted on what kind of response I get from him, but that was the highlight of my summer. Is talking to this elected person.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thanks for that. 78, that's a big number to beat.
Yeah, but it's like one blue lobelia, I mean, one of these. It's
Still
just, you know,
counts.
You gotta see how they grow.
Yeah. I have one more update from afar. So Becky at Coastal Conservation League is pointing us out or wants us to know about this issue where Santee Cooper wants to cut down hundreds of trees in the Francis Bedler Forest. Hasn't any of you been there? It's in Dorchester County. So we don't want that. She's asking us to write letters. So you can check out their website at Coastal Conservation League. And you can go to the news section to read the story, and I'll take you to a link where you can submit a letter on behalf to stop the cutting down of these trees.
What's their purpose for cutting?
I didn't have time to read the news section. Catherine, did you read it?
Yeah, it's a transmission line, they want to
Oh.
come like,
To put it along the road?
too close to, a cypress tree.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, they're proposing 100-foot wide path of cutting down trees for that transmission line.
so if you
They say go
check on their
around.
website. Yep. And with that, y'all can get out of here. On your way out, we can grab some silent auction donation letters or see Kara. You can talk to a chapter board member about serving on the board, and finally go touch a plant. And we have some plants that you can touch.
Yeah, plants. Thanks. Plants on with you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Have a good night.
I'll let you know that you may
Yeah.
That's